G'day everybody, welcome back to the channel. Okay, so today is part 2 of the Stack Audio interview. This is an interview I did a week or so ago, a bit more than that now, a couple of weeks ago, with Theo Stack, the inventor of the isolation footers that I've been talking about on the channel, and Josh Stephenson, who is the front man for Stack Audio. He's the fellow that you would probably be conversing with via email when you reach out to Stack Audio in the UK. This was a really interesting interview. I did touch on that in the intro to the first part of this. It sort of rolled, and so I had to break it up into 2 parts so that it was a bit more easier to digest for everybody. But anyway, a few people have asked me about it, when the second part of this interview is coming up. So it's about to start, and it goes into the other questions that I had for the guys when they agreed to talk to me. And I just wanted to give you guys a real understanding of the people behind the products. Certainly both Theo and Josh are very passionate about what they're doing. They know they're onto something that is pretty important and really does make an audible difference to your hi-fi system, and I certainly can attest to that. The speaker isolation was revolutionary. It really did. You saw my reaction, and they're not leaving from under my system. I have got a lot more of them coming over here now. I am literally going to put underneath everything in my system. So I'll have them under the amplifiers. We're going to be running 6, 3 down either side of my 85 kilo amps. These boards you can see behind me here, I've already made. I'm going to spike those boards, and so that they'll sit on the carpet and get grounded. And then there'll be 3 CSA 3s down either side, the EQ isolation footers for the components. There will also be isolation footers going underneath my preamplifier, my phono stage, my power supplies. Everything will have them underneath. We're going to do all that on the channel. You're going to hear what differences we do here, and I'll talk to you further about how that all happens when all those isolation components arrive. So anyway, stay tuned. Enjoy this interview, and we'll talk soon. Okay, guys, so let's get to the next question, and that is there any particular positions that you would suggest that we put the component isolation underneath our components? Is there anything in particular that is optimal?
So it's more advised on a case-by-case basis, because especially amps and things, they have a transformer on one corner and the weight distribution won't be equal. So we tend to advise customers to, as close as possible, match the place where the original feet were. So for example, if it's a turntable with 3 feet or an amp with 3 feet, we recommend using 3 feet, because that's what they've decided to be the correct positioning for the weight distribution. So essentially that's typically the advice we give.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense, and I thought that might be the answer, but I just thought if there was anything. I know a lot of people that, or certainly privately, have asked me, do we put them underneath the original feet so that they sit on? And I said, I don't think that's the case. I think what you guys are wanting is that particle things to be on the lower body of the chassis of the component. Am I right?
Absolutely, especially also then it just, if you put it on top of the feet, it can change the kind of center of balance as well. So yeah, we have seen it. We saw someone put them up on, I think it was a Riga P10 or something, and that's the only place they could really position it. So there are times where it has to be done, but in an ideal world, they would not be placed on top of the feet.
All right. Well, that's a very good. I'm sure a lot of people will be wondering that question, and that's great that we've got that sorted. Now, this one is a question without notice. You guys don't know about this one, but it was one that one of my subscribers asked. I don't think it's going to be too hard, but now, for instance, in my situation, I have Vitus monoblocks, and they're around 85 kilos each. And I know the situation that we'd be probably going with for those is 3 CSA 3s down either side of it. One of my subscribers has asked me, he has quite heavy amplifiers as well, and it was a private conversation I was having with him, and he wanted to know whether, and asked, could I ask for him, are you thinking about doing a CSA 4 or something like that, so that people could, for instance, if there's 4 feet and there's 4 feet on my amplifiers, and they might want to stay with positioning, which parlays into the last question, with actually keeping the footer near the foot. If we've got such heavy equipment like this, and I mean, there's even heavier. I mean, if you get into some of the Griffin, the Apex, and things like that, and they are quite heavy amplifiers. And so, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so it's something we're looking into. Realistically, because of the weight distribution, it would have to be a different sized body. So it would probably be an additional product rather than an additional CSA because of the size. So yes, it's something we have been working on, and can't really give a exact date, but hopefully might be this time, this half of the year.
Brilliant. Well, I think there's look, I suspect that this end of the market, we're talking about a relatively niche. We're really at the top of Everest here with components that weigh this kind of weight. But I suspect once this gets out and people start to really understand just how good these things are and how good and well they work on ultra high end gear, they're going to want to buy them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's about offering choice, really, because, we don't want to kind of segregate one section because their amp's a bit heavier. So, yeah, I think even though it may not make the most business sense to do it, is something we want to offer because we want to be able to offer more choice. But it's quite rare we come across people with really heavy amps, but equally that might be because we don't offer it.
Yeah, well, that could possibly be the case. As I said, I know of one fellow who was asking that question. My answer to him was, at the moment, I'll certainly put the question to you guys, but at the moment, and I told him what my situation is, I'm going to be running 3 down either side to cover the weight. Because the other thing that I really want to touch on too is and why I like your product over ISO Acoustics product is they have a different model for a weight range. Now, give or take, that's what they do, and that's fine. That's how they're marketing their product and how where their IT is in that product. But what I love about what you guys are doing is you have, certainly with the speaker isolation anyway, you have either the older 50s, 70s or 100s all handle the same way. They just have more of that secret sauce that you've invented, Theo, in the isolation footer. And,
yes.
And I really think that's clever because you're not necessarily worried then about weight and about, have I got the right ones for the right weight? And what is the weight of my speakers? And all of these sorts of questions come up. And I mean, for instance, I had ISO Acoustics, what were they? They were Gaia Titan Theos, which I think are 100 to 145 kilos, and my speakers are 116. So I was going, right, I've got to get the right ones, and then I've got to get the carpet platform spike things and all of this other stuff, add on, and away you go. What I love about you guys is essentially your part of the whole thing that you guys do is we spike the footer to get that, to try and absolutely minimize that front baffle harmonic and vibration, which of course, as we know, absolutely we know this, it smears timing, it smears the sound stage, it smears the focus for imaging and all of those things. Once these speakers are back as most speaker manufacturers intend them to be, which is rigidly anchored somehow, some way, with the best of both worlds here, with the particle impact dampening technology that's also there. As I said, it's literally the best of both worlds. And when you hear these things, you, as I said before, you just can't unhear them. There's nowhere you can't go back. You just sort of your speakers just they disappear. That's one of the absolute things that I notice so much more. I mean, my speakers do a wonderful job at imaging, soundstage depth, width, height, and all that stuff. Wilsons do that brilliantly well. And by virtue of that, they tend to disappear, but they absolutely vanish once they've got these things underneath them, because there's no spurious stuff happening anywhere else around that brings your attention back to the speaker. The speaker just gets to do its job properly. It also is isolated from creating any issues in the floor, which then drag your attention back to, oh, there's two things screaming at me from either side of the room here. And all of a sudden, all that imaging, all that detail that's in the recording is able to be on a system like mine, and many systems for that matter, not just system at this level, any system, it gives those components their ability to be able to perform at their best.
100%. Yeah, no, it's definitely the removing as much vibration coming from the speaker it's a ripple effect. It enters kind of hi-fi equipment, it reverberates around the room. It's an important element, and the reason the weight doesn't really matter with the particle impact dampening is because it works. I mean, all vibration is absorbed by transferring it into heat, but it works different to the isoacoustics in the respect that theirs is like a compliance solution. So they have to have different weight classes because you want it to compress at a specific level, because that kind of dictates the elasticity, so the amount of vibration it absorbs. So that's where their movement element is in, which absorbs vibration. Whereas we have it so that the particles, the outer shell is solid and rigid, but the movement, because you can use mass to absorb vibration, but you need a lot of it. But the movement is the particles colliding, and that's how we can kind of keep it solid and rigid. So it's just it's a different approach, and that's why we kind of offer that.
Yeah, and it works. Let me tell you. Now, I think that almost gets me into the next question, which is well, there's a couple of questions that sort of fall into this next bit, which segues beautifully into it. So the first one that I had is there any break-in period, for the component isolation or the speaker isolation that we should be aware of?
Sure. So yes, there is, because as these parts get shipped and as they're installed, the particles will move, and ideally you want it as kind of level as possible, and that, once you install it, it's kind of impossible. So once, especially heavy bassy music, helps the particles settle. So there's a break-in period in that respect that I couldn't say exactly how much time. Josh speaks to customers and said kind of 2-3 hours of solid playing can settle the particles. But I'd recommend like playing some pretty bass heavy music, because that will really help to settle them.
Makes sense. Yeah. No, and I think that's good advice. I must admit that, I mean, look, as I said, there's a video there that shows exactly the very first thing I played, but I must also say that with a couple of hours of, and you did tell me this too, Josh, a couple of hours of time to get everything just to settle down again, it made a difference again. It just further enhanced the footer's ability to isolate. It just seemed to isolate that little bit. But that's what I noticed anyway. I was hearing just more isolation again, almost more decoupling of the speaker from the floor.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And one thing I did do, and I don't know whether this is advisable, but I'm going to ask, these are questions for me too, is that I basically gave the footer a bit of a shake. To try and level it out. I figured that might work just before I screwed it under, because I was pretty much on a fairly flat surface by that point anyway, and I just had the Wilson jack underneath there, so I could screw up in there. And I found that that's just the OCD in me. Thought, well, if I do this and it flattens it out, that's going to probably help.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the best thing to do, is to just give it a shake on kind of a level axis, and then install them, and then again play the music, because once you install them, they're going to be at an angle. But we with the design specifically, we've tried to mitigate that becoming a serious issue. I think the difference it will make will be noticeable, but not massive. But it's just one of those things that it's not too hard to do, so might as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that component isolation comes with the three different the CSA silicon insert that screws up in the
Yes.
for the different weights for different equipment and what have you. Could you talk a little bit about that process and how it came to be?
Sure. So we weren't the first to do it. Like isoacoustics have different weight classes, and other manufacturers have different weight classes. I mean, in an ideal world, each isolator would be modeled for a very specific weight. And we will look at expanding our CSA range. But the reason for it is because you want the isolator to compress at a certain level regardless of the weight, because that kind of dictates its elasticity. So if you've got a really heavy amp on a CSA1, it will be far too compressed and its elasticity will not be where it needs to be for kind of the characteristics we have designed it for. So that's the main reason for the different weights. But that's basically it, really.
Yeah, well, it makes sense. Obviously, you've got a compliant factor there that you want to meet for the component, so that CSA aspect of the EQ actually is doing what it's designed to do.
100%. I think compliance is the key when it comes to isolating equipment, because I think I've seen a lot of devices where it's just solid metal and it's marketed as kind of absorbing vibration, but it's important to remember you need movement and mass to absorb vibration. And like a little metal spike or a metal footer, it's going to make a difference, but it's not going to absorb the vibrations. And specifically with hi-fi, it's the low frequency vibrations that have to be absorbed, because they're the ones which travel so easily through everything, really. And whereas high frequencies tend to be dissipated a lot easier through master building, even cables and et cetera. So it's a balancing act.
Yeah, as I say, I mean, I've had all kinds of spikes and things that I've tried over the years, and I just find that a spike ends up working like a highway.
It is.
Two-way street. I mean, okay, everything's focused to a point, but that point still resonates, and resonances can still come back up that point and then spread into the equipment.
Yeah, I think, I'm glad to see that's now kind of becoming like common knowledge, whereas, some time back it was the theory is the spike will allow energy to drain out of it, but it won't allow it to come back up because there's like a fine little tip at the end. But it's flawed, because obviously as vibration can travel down, it can travel back up. And I think, like you touched in one of your other videos, is spikes, the main thing is the rigidity, and also just the level balance, because it's free fine points. So spikes have a place, but just not for absorbing vibration. I think that's the key. Yeah,
I totally and absolutely agree with that. So this is another question from a subscriber. So you guys might not know about this one either. If one was to kit out their whole hi-fi system in Stack Audio, and I can see Josh there, eyes just lit up. So, for instance, how would we start? How would we get about it? What would be the first components that you think would there be an order that you would advise?
So, I mean, Josh can answer this, but what I would say is I'd recommend the EQs, because I think it's the easiest way to try it. You don't have to like unscrew the spikes from your speakers and set them up. You just put them under to kind of, it's just, that's the easiest way to properly hear what difference proper isolation can make, and it's relatively inexpensive in comparison to other kind of upgrades. So that's where I'd start. And in order of what equipment I'd start on first, there's so many variables, so it's always hard to really recommend. We sometimes send people some extra CSAs so they can just test it under different weight classes. We get different feedback. I mean, obviously tube amplifiers are probably the best place to start, but it varies. So I think just testing out with the EQs and then moving to the speaker isolators is the best way, because it's just, I think it's the most economical and also the easiest route.
Well, I'd probably suggest too that once you make a a relatively small investment. And I will say this, in the grand scheme of things, the price that you guys are offering these component things it's great value. It is seriously fantastic value for money. And then trying something that is relatively inexpensive in the hi-fi world will just excite your appetite for more of it, because that's exactly what it did for me. I once I put these things under. Now, I will tell a little story here, and that is originally a very good friend of mine, Paul Paramore, who Josh knows well, because I think he's placed a rather large order with you guys recently. And I'm setting his hi-fi system up. In fact, only today I had his LX521s in the room here, and I'm packing the system up, and it's heading up to northern New South Wales, where he's from, and I'll be flying up there in about a week's time to set it all up. So, and hopefully we'll be able to literally get everything underneath his system, and even if we don't have them there in time, he'll certainly be able to do that himself. But Paul actually, as a gift to me, bought me a set of the EQ CSA 3s for my Kuzma Star BR turntable, as Josh will very much remember. And as I said, that's what started it all off for me, because I put those under my turntable. And I mean, Frank Kuzma knows how to make a foot, but essentially it's a spike arrangement as well, as we was talking about, Theo. And I will put these things under, and I just sort of shook my head and sort of went, no. And I actually went to the trouble of taking them off and because this is the reviewer in me, I had to check this out I couldn't believe my ears. Screwed the things under, they sat down again and went, no, that's not good. And then, or not as good. Now, it's a bloody nice turntable, let's not be mistaken here, but I put the CSA 3s under the EQs again, and instantly a decoupling happened. So much so that I literally jumped up and down here in front of my rack. I could never do that with Frank's feet underneath that turntable without hearing something through my speakers. Nothing. Zero, mate. Zero. Both of you, I'm just here to tell you, I just caught, again, it was one of those, oh my God, this is proper decoupling at a level that I've not experienced before.
Yeah. I think with turntables, I mean, there are some exceptions, like with like the Upper 12, for example, it had a suspended sub chassis. You wouldn't necessarily want to put suspension underneath that, because it can really kind of mess with how it works. But I think, if you have a rigid high-end turntable, then that doesn't have some form of decoupling, it could definitely benefit from decoupling.
Well, some of the money that people spend on turntables, and I will say this to my subscribers and anybody watching this video, do yourself a favour. These things are a small investment and a fraction, an absolute fraction of the cost of your turntable. And,
of course.
I mean, doing it. I mean, I can say this because, I mean, I don't expect you guys to say this. I know you love your products and you're passionate about them, and I'm passionate about being an end user of them and hearing what I'm hearing. Now, as I said, my integrity is everything in this game. I have to 100% believe in what I say, and I have to say what I believe.
Yes.
And this stuff works. It doesn't just make a small difference that you think you're hearing. And I know there's a lot of that placebo effect that goes on especially in tweaks where there's something there, isn't there?
100%.
That you guys are absolutely onto something here. This really is amazing. As I'm looking over at all my components, the digital stuff and the turntable that's got them on there now, and they're just not ever coming out. I mean, until and unless you guys invent something better, and then I'll be the very first one to put my hand up and say, I better place an order. I need to get some of those. So yeah, look, I mean, okay, I will. We're nearly at the end of this. One of my subscribers asked, should we do this in an order? And it makes sense to sort of go invest in a small amount, try these under. I would certainly suggest that tube amps definitely, but certainly digital components. Is it really? That's where I started. I mean, the turntable's an analog component, and I heard a massive difference there. But when I stuck these things underneath my two playback designs things, I mean, in this country, there's about 70 nearly $75,000 worth of components there in those two pieces of equipment, and I wasn't expecting to hear that kind of improvement. There was just a silence. There was like anything that happened that creates that noise we call jitter, that you can't necessarily put your finger on, but you know it's there because it gets edgy. Yes. And it sounds just a little bit fatiguing. Now, I mean, the playback design stuff doesn't do that anyway, to an extent where you really would think you would notice a big difference. But I'm telling you now, when those things went under there, it just lifted a veil, another veil that I just didn't think was there.
Absolutely. And I mean, like you touched in a previous video, oscillates or clocks oscillate, and if they drift ever so slightly out of what they're designed to do, it has an effect. And I think microphony, so vibrations turning into electrical signals, often seen as snake oil. But if you go into kind of other industries like space and et cetera, there, vibration, microphony plays a big factor, especially like in the satellites and things like that. It's obviously they're moving far, much more amplitude, but microphony is a real thing. I mean, it happens. Loads and loads of components oscillate or vibrate, and they can drift out of that from external vibration.
Yeah, that's jitter right there. Lesson 101 on jitter. So, and if you can do everything you can to isolate the component so it's just dealing with its own things and not having to deal with other things that are coming into the rack. And I mean, I've got a pretty good rack in here as well, and I mean, the difference was absolutely there. So last question for you guys. Is there anything else that's coming? Or I know we did speak about you working on something else that was coming that you've already touched on. But is there anything else that you want to talk to us about that we haven't already covered?
Well, firstly, I'd like to say thank you to all the customers. It's always a pleasure talking to you. We love learning about your systems because as we continue to grow, we'd love to implement higher end pieces, which we discuss heavily via email and other conversations. And I always look into the products and we kind of build up a list, and it's always a pleasure speaking to you all. And we're hoping when we move unit, we're adding a few new production members, etc. So we can kind of, at the moment, the product's amazing, the customer service is good, but we'd like the dispatch time to be perfect because sometimes it takes several days and customers are having to wait. We'd like to get it so you place an order, it comes straight out to you, you can get straight into testing the product rather than be waiting and thinking, no, it's been a few extra days, I need to get in contact with you guys. We're hoping to scale up massively so we can provide excellent free tier service rather than anything.
Yeah, brilliant. Well,
oh yeah, that's the other thing. Yeah, so one thing we're hoping to do is, because like our intent is to kind of deliver the best possible sound with our products, but we feel one area that's often overlooked is kind of room acoustics. So it's not a product as such, but we're soon hoping to offer our historic customers and also future customers of our speaker isolators a consultation, free of charge consultation on speaker positioning and room acoustics. So we're still at the early stages of working out how it's going to work, but it'll be pictures and measurements. And like we said, Josh's brother, the sound engineering, so he's going to kind of take control of that and communicate with customers and just give advice. We're not trying to upsell or no strings attached, basically. But I just feel like it's an important element for customers to properly set up their room, and we'd like to help them do that.
Well, I think that speaks, leaps and bounds for the absolute commitment that you guys have, and the customer service that you guys provide through Stack Audio, and that's just a testament, Theo, to really having your heart and your head in the right place. Yeah. And I know a lot of my subscribers and anybody that will watch this video will certainly agree with me that just shows a true commitment to your customers, and that comes through in this interview as well. So
Appreciate it.
all I want to do is thank you both very, very much for spending this time with me. It's been an absolute pleasure to actually see the faces behind the names, and I'm sure that all of my subscribers would be thinking absolutely the same thing. I'm sure we'll be doing this again. I plan on getting over to the UK at some point. We'll shoot some video. I'd love to come through and see the factory, see what you guys do there, and go out and have a beer with you or something.
Absolutely, yeah. And thank you very much from us, because we've really been enjoying watching your content. Josh has it on so often, and it's it's just really nice, and you're incredibly enthusiastic about it all, and which is just it's great to see. So I wish the channel all the best of luck.
Thank you guys very much. We'll certainly be talking soon. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you
for your time. All right, cheers.
Bye.